Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today is Friday, so get excited. We have the weekend coming our way. And today we've got something for you guys to do over the weekend, a fun activity, a new scavenger hunt. But before I tell you all about that new scavenger hunt, let's of course talk about our riddle. Now, today's riddle is a little silly, a little goofy, as all things should be. Our riddle today is, where do you take your boat when it's sick? All right, at the end of our video, as we always do, after reading a little bit of our chapter book, we will figure out the answer to our riddle together. So if you can't think of it, no worries, I'm here to help. Now, let's go find out about that new scavenger hunt. It's time to talk about our new scavenger hunt and what exactly you guys can get up to this weekend. So our scavenger hunt this week is all about our 5 senses. So what are they? We've got sight, we've got smell, taste, touch, and hearing. Those are our 5 senses. And we are going to use them this weekend to find some things on our scavenger hunt list. I'm really excited to share this with you guys. I think you're going to love it. So stay tuned and see what we got going on. Now, as a reminder, this is available in the links below. So go click on it, check it out, print it out, keep it up on your phone while you search, whatever is easiest for you. So now let's check it out. I hope you guys see what I mean now when I say we will be using our 5 senses. I found this awesome scavenger hunt online and I wanted to share it with you guys because it is so stinking cool. Branching out from just finding something to really kind of being immersed in it. Now, what are we looking for? Well, we're gonna try and find something rough. That has to do with the sense of touch. We're going to try and find something loud. That has to do with our sense of hearing. We're gonna try and find 3 of the same thing, that is sight. We're going to try and find something that smells good, that is our sense of smell. And then we're going to try and find something that tastes sweet, that is our taste sense. So everything comes down to those 5 senses. I wish you guys the best of luck and I'm excited to see what all you can find. Good luck. All right, now let's go do our positive action. Today, our positive action or positive tip is going to focus in on another big emotion. We've talked about love and anger, and today we are going to be tackling the emotion of worry. Now, worry is a pretty big emotion, right? It's the emotion that kind of controls us because when we're worried, all that's happening up here is, oh my gosh, I can only think about what I'm worried about or any aspect of what I'm like completely anxious about. An example of this is when I was younger, I used to get super worried or anxious about my tests. And while a little bit of anxiety helped me because it said, hey, Emma, you've got to prepare for this test and study and know what's on it, it also times became a very negative thing. Because when I was so worried about my tests, I didn't do too well on them because I was so worried. All I could think about was, oh my gosh, this, that, the other thing, this is gonna be on there, what if the answer's wrong? I would spend all my brain time worrying, working myself up over the test, but in reality, I had studied, I had done my best. But my worry said, no, this is what we're going to think about. And sometimes it's hard to say, no brain, we're gonna worry about something else, or we're going to shift our brain's perspective. We're not going to focus on that as much. But if we don't have the tools, that can be pretty difficult. So let's talk about some tools. A way that we can exercise kind of calming ourselves down and recentering ourselves when we're worried is taking a step back and really looking at the situation. So we'll use the situation of me being worried about my tests again. Now, when I was younger, I would get so freaked out. I'd be like, what is on there? But in reality, I already knew because my teachers had told me. My brain was just trying to get me worried and worked up about something that wasn't there. And if this is the case for you, I suggest reaching out to an adult. There's lots of people who can help you figure it out. What I did was I would go to my teacher and say, hey, I'm a little worried about what's going to be on the test. Can you explain to me a little bit more what's going to be on there and what absolutely won't be on there? Asking for help and clarifying things helps us bring down how worried we are. And help is never a bad thing, right? What we talk about all the time is reaching out for help and giving help. Kindness and love make the world go round. And as we continue to grow and become the best versions of ourselves, we're going to need a little help, and we're going to have to give some folks a little bit of help. So don't be afraid to reach out. People are always there to help you. All right, so now that we've talked a little bit about our positive action, let's move on to our book. Oh, hey guys. Sorry I didn't see you. I was too busy catching up on James and the giant peach because we're just starting to get into this story, and already I'm very interested to see what happens because something very, very peculiar is about to happen. But we don't know what yet, but James told us about it. So let's keep on reading and see what we can find out. Aunt Sponge had a long-handed mirror in her lap, and she kept picking it up and gazing at her own hideous face. "I look and smell," Aunt Sponge declared, "as lovely as a rose. Just feast your eyes upon my face. Observe my shapely nose. Behold my heavenly silky locks. And if I take off both my socks, you'll see my dainty toes. But don't forget," Aunt Spiker cried, "how much your tummy shows." Aunt Sponge went red. Aunt Spiker said, "My sweet, you cannot win. Behold my gorgeous curvy shape, my teeth, my charming grin. Oh, beauteous me, how I adore my radiant looks. And please ignore the pimple on my chin, my dear old trout," Aunt Sponge cried out, "you're only bones and skin. Such loveliness as I possess can only truly shine in Hollywood," Aunt Sponge declared. "Oh, wouldn't that be fine? I'd capture all the nation's hearts. They'd give me all the leading parts. The stars would all resign." "I think you'd make," Aunt Spiker said, "a lovely Frankenstein." Poor James, still working away and at the chopping block. The heat was terrible. He was sweating all over. His arms were aching. The chopper was a large, blunt thing, far too heavy for a small boy to use. And as he worked, James began thinking about all the other children in the world and what they might be doing at this moment. Some would be riding tricycles in their gardens, some would be walking in cool woods and picking up bunches of wildflowers, and all the little friends whom he used to know would be down by the seaside, playing in the wet sand, splashing around in the water. Great tears began oozing out of James' eyes and rolling down his cheeks. Here's a picture of poor little James crying. He stopped working and leaned against the chopping block, overwhelmed by his own unhappiness. "What's the matter with you?" Aunt Spiker screeched, glaring at him over the top of her steel spectacles. James began to cry. "Stop that immediately and get on with your work, you nasty little beast," Aunt Sponge ordered. "Okay, Auntie Sponge," James cried out, "and Auntie Spiker, couldn't we please, just for once, go down to the seaside on the bus? It isn't very far. I feel so hot and awful and lonely." "Beat him," cried Aunt Sponge. "I certainly will," cried Aunt Spiker. She glared at James, and James looked back at her with large, frightened eyes. "I shall beat you later in the day, when I don't feel so hot," she said. "And now, get out of my sight, you disgusting little worm, and give me some peace." James turned and ran. He ran off as fast as he could to the end of the garden and hid himself behind the clump of old dirt that was mentioned earlier. Then he covered his face in his hands and began to cry and cry. 3. It was at this point that the first thing of all the rather peculiar things that led to so many other much more peculiar things happened to him. For suddenly, just behind him, James heard a rustling of leaves. And he turned around to see an old man in a funny dark green suit emerging from the bushes. He was a very small old man, but He had a huge bald head and a face that was covered all over with bristly black whiskers. He stopped when he was about 3 yards away and stood there, just leaning on his stick, staring hard at James. When he spoke, his voice was very slow and creaky. "Come closer to me, little boy," he said, beckoning James with a finger. "Come right up close to me, and I will show you something wonderful." James was too frightened to move. The old man hobbled a step or two nearer. Then he put a hand into the pocket of his jacket and took out a small white paper bag. "You see this?" he whispered, waving the bag gently to and fro in front of James' face. "You know what this is, my dear? You know what's inside this little bag?" Then he came nearer still, leaning forward and pushing his face close to James, so that James could feel his breath blowing on his cheek. The breath smelled musty and stale, and slightly mildewy, like the air of an old cellar. "Take a close look, my dear," he said, opening the bag and tilting it towards James. Inside, he could see a mass of a tiny green thing that looked like a little stone or crystal, each about the size of a grain of rice. They were extraordinarily beautiful, and there was a strange brightness about them, a sort of luminous quality that made them glow and sparkle in the most wonderful way. "Listen to them," the old man whispered. "Listen to them move." James stared into the bag, and sure enough, there was a faint rustling sound coming from inside. Then he noticed that all the thousands of little green things were slowly, very slowly, stirring about and moving over each other as though they were alive. "There's more power and magic in those things than there are in the rest of the world put together," the old man said softly. But, what are they?" James muttered, finding his voice at last. "Where do they come from?" "Aha!" the old man whispered. "You'd never guess that," he said, crouching down now, pushing his face still closer to James, until the tip of his long nose was actually touching the skin of James's forehead. Then suddenly he jumped back and began waving his stick madly in the air. "Crocodile tongues!" he cried. 1,000 long, slim crocodile tongues, boiled in the skull of a dead witch for 20 days and nights, and the eyeballs of a lizard. Add the fingers of a young monkey, the gizzard of a pig, the beak of a green parrot, the juice of a porcupine, and 3 spoonfuls of sugar. Stew for another week, and then let the moon do the rest. At once, he pushed the white paper bag into James' hands and said, "Here, you take it. It's yours." All right, part 4. James Henry Trotter stood there clutching the bag and staring at the old man. And now the old man said, "All you've got to do is this. Take a large jug of water and pour all the little green things into it. Then, very slowly, one by one, add 10 hairs from your own head. That'll set 'em off. It gets 'em going. In a couple of minutes, the water will begin to froth and bubble furiously. And as soon as this happens, you must quickly drink it. Drink it all down, the whole jugful, in one gulp. And then, my dear, you will feel it churning and boiling in your stomach. The steam will start coming out of your mouth. And immediately after, that marvelous thing starts happening to you, that fabulous, unbelievable thing, and you will never be miserable again in your life. Because you are miserable, aren't you? You needn't tell me. I know all about it. Now, off you go and do exactly as I say, and don't whisper a word of this to those horrible aunts of yours. Not a word. And don't let those green things get away from you either. Because if they do escape, then they'll be working their magic upon somebody else instead of you. And that isn't what you want at all, is it, my dear? Whoever they first meet, be it bug, insect, animal, or tree, that will be the one who gets the full power of their magic. So hold the bag tight. Don't tear the paper. Off you go. Hurry up. Don't wait. Now's the time. Hurry! With that, the old man turned away and disappeared into the bushes. Oh my gosh. The story just keeps getting crazier and crazier. Old man coming out of bushes? Whew! I'm excited to see what those magic crocodile tongues are gonna do. So make sure you tune in next time to see what we read next, what happens next in James and the Giant Peach. All right, now before we say our goodbyes, we've got to talk about our riddle. So, who remembers our riddle from the beginning of the video? You do? Sweet. But you don't? That's fine. I can help remind you. So, our riddle was, where do you take a boat when it's sick? And did you figure it out? Like I said, it is a little silly. I think it's really fun, and I think you guys will as well. Well, when your boat's sick, you take them to the dock. Get it? Like the doctor, but a dock also where you park your boat. It gave me a laugh, and I hope it gave you one as well. Now it's time to say our goodbyes. Bye, guys. Thank you for watching.